I read your Substack article this week. It seems like over the last 2 decades, Western leaders have allowed China to rise to power pretty much unchecked and unchallenged. We've become more and more dependent on them. What problems do you foresee in the future for the West if we don't tackle this issue?
Well, one, you just have lots of problems untangling from them. You need to start having critical elements to life and life systems, society at large, humanity, made in-house. You just can't have, and then like pharmaceuticals, toothpaste, all that stuff, and that because you really can't defend yourself. If you went to war with your neighbor, but your neighbor is safeguarding all your money, right? How do you actually stand toe to toe with that? You kind of have to come hat in hand, kind of begging, you're soft pedaling. Hey, can we just find a way to get along? So they have all the power in that regard. Now we have power too, because if we don't have our stuff made there, their economy goes into the ashes. It's already seems like it's in ashes. It's peaked. Just a few years ago, there was a lot of hysteria about China overtaking the U.S. in GDP. They can't print money like we can, so our GDP is massive compared to theirs today. But man, when it all started, you're right. All of these government leaders kicked the doors open on a country to have our stuff made there, Europe too. And China had never, and to my recollection, my studies, they have never engaged with the world. They were just staying behind their Great Wall and kind of doing their own thing. They've been attacked a couple times by Japan, and Japan kicked their rear each time. I mean, they have no idea how to fight. So all of this stuff is new for them. All this wealth is brand new for them. It's like, it's, I don't say anything derogatory, but it's like someone just inherit, an 18-year-old inheriting $1 billion. I don't know if they're not going to know what to do with that. They're acting entitled, selfish. They're communist. So that's the evil in it. When I talk about evil in the article, what problems? Well, eventually communism, the belief of it is that everyone should work for the state on the planet, everyone within reach. So they're not hostile in a way where they want to nuke stuff. They just want everyone under their thumb.
China's the blueprint for the New World Order. Authoritarian control over its citizens, dictating what they can and can't do. And it seems like we're handing control over to them so that we can mirror what they do over here.
Yeah, let me ask it to you this way. When you really think, and just without any emotions, what is the most important thing to you? And just the most important thing. So if I said, you can have your family, but no money. You'll never earn another dollar. You won't find a dollar. You can beg for it on the streets and no one will give it to you. Family or money? Which would you pick?
Family.
Wow. If you really think about it, though, I think you'd pick money. Because now you can't eat. You're going to starve and wither away. No one's going to buy you food, no handouts. So for existence, really, I could have started with an easier one. Your apartment, your home, or money. Because without the money, you're not going to live in the home. And without the money, it's hard to interact with family. So you're going to go move in with mom and dad. So there's an old saying, you can't serve two masters. A quarterback, a soccer player can't play for two teams. And we've seen athletes try to play two sports. Michael Jordan he was very good at basketball, he tried to play Major League Baseball. So these politicians, these elected officials, how can they serve us when money's the most important thing? And it is. That's the sickening fact. We don't live in the woods anymore, and I make canoes, and you make arrows, and someone harvests corn, and we all pitch into the community, and we give our time and efforts with love into the community. We share everything. Now, those days are over. Now it's every man, woman for himself. So when the politicians sit in their office, guess who gets to come by their office all day? You and I are at work. Guess who else is at work? Lobbyists. They're at work, sitting off the door of some elected official, wanting to bend their ear about how the world will become better if we have, financial and trade relationships with China. And then It just makes so much sense to have the drug. You just tell a politician, well, the drugs will be cheaper if we have them made in China, and that'll look good when you stand at the podium for re-election. Okay, yeah, let's do it. Wait, China's communist. I mean, it's just sickening. You and I would think, yeah, I don't care. We're not going to do that. We're not going to have our drugs made in China. We're not going to have our tires made in China. We're going to have our toothpaste and our drywall and our dog food and our AstroTurf and our steel and our all that stuff made in China. We're not going to do it. We're just not going to do that because that's going to kill jobs here for the people that elected me. And that's what the article's really about. You can't trust these people with stuff. You got to stand up, live where your feet are, wake up, be self-empower again, knock the dust and the rust off, and recognize that life is going to be what you choose for it to be. You can't be waiting around for someone to improve stuff. You go rooting for the damn government to improve things. They're the ones that this article shows in probably the most severe example I can find that they've created for us to read about is the raising up of a sleeping communist country to become the greatest irritant to humanity since Stalin or Hitler's Nazi regime. It was all intentional. It's all because of money. But the money, it didn't have to happen. It didn't really improve anyone's lives. I don't care if buying a set of dish towels at Walmart is $6 when it used to be $18 if it were made in America. I don't care because the jobs are gone in Europe and in America. For what? So politicians are not good defenders of principles at all. And if they were a business that was in charge of defending principles, they went bankrupt a long time ago. And we need to wake up to that fact. We need to bring the principles back into our own lives and mirror back to the government exactly how it's supposed to go. And then someday none of them will be there. We'll have unelected those types altogether. It only takes, 4 or 6 years to have it to cleanse the government of the mindset that they're going to continue to betray us to solve problems.
It reminds me of when China they had that one child per family policy years ago, which they scrapped because of the declining population. Birth rates across Europe are at an all-time low at the moment, across multiple countries in Europe. And some people argue that this is a good thing. We've got limited resources. We're overpopulated, apparently. Some people say, I don't agree with that. What do you think? Do you think we have enough resources to look after everybody, or do you think the declining birth rates is a natural phenomenon and maybe it's a good thing?
So, multiple answers to that. So first, in the context of, people are getting pregnant less often or at a lower rate, that speaks of depression. It also speaks of futility. It also speaks of, I really don't know if I want to bring a kid into this world. And it also speaks of people just worn the hell out from all the stress. And it's all caused by the government. I know we don't have long enough time to go into that. I'm putting a book out that'll cover it. People can read about it on their own. It's easy. I'm not making this stuff up. Everything has a source. So low fertility or low baby production, if you want to call it that, is a symptom. What's the source? When you look at times where having babies goes way up as a rate, it's funny. I don't know if it happens with soccer, but it probably does. But in the city where a town wins the Super Bowl here in America, birth rates generally go higher. Right after a massive war, birth rates generally go higher. The country comes together. There's a feeling of unity and safeness and kind of, God and country. Something psychological causes birth rates to suddenly go up. And there was an event, cause and effect. So part one is, no, it's not good if your society isn't happy enough to bring babies into the world and have families of 2 or 3. Maybe a lot of parents are just having one and they're like, hey, we checked the box. They're so stressed out. I mean, I have some, 30-year-olds in my life that have newborns, and I can, I don't say anything, but I can just tell. Man, they're just worn out. They're worn out. It looks a little bit like they're playing with an object. They don't really have the focus, the attention. They're not allowed to. They're not permitted to. It's not a luxury to have the focus it kind of takes to raise a human being. Daycare does it these days. Part two is we have the resources. Earth is massive. What we also have in the way that's ruining how that functions, resources to the shelves, is governments are in charge of all this crap. They regulate all this crap. They dictate how it all goes. And because they've made life super tough for everybody, 100 years ago in this city, in this country, 50, 60 years ago in this country, 155 million people lived in cities. That means most of the people lived in the countryside. They lived near where food is actually produced. We weren't so factory dependent, and everything didn't come in some plastic wrapper, right? Today, there's 255 million people living in cities. So from the government printing press, causing inflation, causing people to have to seek a closer proximity living, closer to the government services, well, those are offered in cities. So the countryside empties and people pour into the cities. When all this bursts, you're going to see just how important it is to actually have real food and live close by to it. So when you look at 1971, when Nixon ended the gold standard and took the world off a financial reality and it became unhinged, last point, global population was 3.7 billion people. Today it's 8.1. We've more than doubled our humanity's population in 50 years. And governments suck at managing anything big, for sure. We can give credit where it's due in little microcosms of government management. But on big scale items, they're terrible. I mean, even the military runs extraordinarily inefficiently. So something that big is just really hard for human. Imagine one president has to manage a $7 trillion budget and all that, where that money goes. It's just not. It's not possible. That's why the framers in our country thought, hey, let's have 50 presidents. We'll call them governors, and they'll be in charge of each state. And that way we'll diversify out and share the burden of managing the country's needs by having 50 powerful governors, presidents of each state, engage with how that all works out. So government is the source of all the issue. Not necessarily the people are bad, just saying the function, the ecosystem of government is woefully inept when it comes to managing big stuff. Earth definitely has the bounty, but here's the funny one, when we talk about global warming, when everyone can print money, every country, and we don't have to respect limits and principles anymore, then we do have tons of babies, more than we can afford, which is why the world's governments owe $303 trillion in debt. That's what that means. It means that we outgrew how we manage it. We got way too much of a resource to be able to manage caring for it. And would you say the quality of life is better 54 years later after Nixon's decision? You might have a lot of touchscreen devices and instant access to things you want, but are you happy? No. When I talk to 30-year-olds, when they become honest, man, they're lost. They're empty. They think image is all that matters. The script is flipped, man. In my day, don't judge a book by its cover. Now, that's the only thing you judge a book by.
The UK government announced earlier this week that they might start offering cash incentives to people to euthanize their elderly relatives once assisted dying becomes legal in the country, it just sounds like a parody. It sounds like a joke. Like that can't be true. This push for assisted dying or euthanasia, they're doing it under the guise of saving the planet, climate change, or helping with overpopulation. Do you agree? Do you think it's healthy in any way do you think it's healthy to society to euthanize anybody?
I think the bedrock of disagreement for this, and this again is another symptom, what's the cause? The cause is society lives outside alignment with Earth, right? We are just an overgrown deer population. The source of all of this comes from government ideas. You're describing a government idea that, well, we could just kill people that have been here for a while, and they would draw less on resources. So I don't really know what a 70-year-old's contribution is to the carbon footprint, probably a lot lower than a 20-year-old or a 40-year-old. They're more sedentary in their life. They're not commuting to work anymore. Goodness gracious. So, but here again, another cause of the symptom is, well, we improved what we eat. In a way, we've kind of ruined what we eat, but supplements and healthcare. So when we used to be dead at 40, how long you lived wasn't so precious. how you lived was precious. And mostly, even if there's always been suffering, but we were connected to family, we were connected to our towns, we were connected to our neighbors. So we live fulfilled, because the only thing that will actually fill up a human being, just like the only thing that will actually fill up a glass, is a liquid. And the only currency that actually makes humanity work is connection to other humans. Going through the struggles together, creating together, suffering together, fighting together. Losing together and winning together, having just every single thing, all the town halls. Like Europe's a great example of this. Is all the things you guys celebrate over there. So many things. We celebrate federal holidays here, right? Towns don't generally have their own little parades, and no one has to go to work today. You have all that. You have that in Europe because you have the history of what life was like before money was the object. So that's ridiculous. It's sickening. And again, it won't solve anything. You're not going to get the world to agree to that.
I just wonder what these grandparents or great-grandparents who, they've given up so much to raise these families and they've loved them and, they've got so much wisdom, and they're looking on television, seeing these ads saying, euthanize your grandparents, euthanize them and we'll give you a cash incentive. They're being guilt-tripped into considering the unthinkable in order to help their families.
How do you have that conversation? Let's play this out real quick. Let's say you're my granddad and I go to you and I go, hey, Grandpa, the groceries are tough and the electric bills, so the great government of England will give us $2,500 if I can get the doctor to just inject you in the neck with something, and then you'll go off to heaven and I'll see you in like 40 years. Right? Can you help us, Dad? It's $2,500. What would you say to that?
I'd go one of two ways. Either I would give them the middle finger and tell them where to go, or my heart would be a little bit broken, I think, that the fact that my son or my grandson wants to kill me just for a little bit of cash.
But this is where you better be scared. We're laughing about something, but see, now the government, in my opinion, and the book will show this, the governments, again, I'm not attacking people. They're in a role. They don't know what they're doing. That's why the world is such a mess. I mean, God darn. How people just step back and look. Just that great British film, The Man That Went Up a Hill and Came Down a Mountain. Just in your mind, go up on a mountaintop. Look down on society. Now focus in on what the government's doing. Now look at society again. Now look back at the government. Can you see the connections? And then when you look back at society one last time, you can see the mess. It's just a mess, a stressed, just tangled up, unorganized, distracted, stressed out mess of suffering. No one is actually not say no one, but most people just are not finding peace. To be human is to be peace. God said, be still and know that I am God. Governments aren't God. And we're running and running and running on that gerbil wheel, and we can't focus and we can't find that peace inside because we're not even looking for it. We're not still. And so when you think about what governments are doing now to solve the problem, here's the point. They think we're the problem. We're the problem. They're the problem. I would give them $1 million if they would go ahead and euthanize themselves. That's not a threat. I know everyone's, Paul made a threat. No, it's just a visual. They're making the suggestion we kill our parents, grandparents. I think they're the problem. I think it's obvious. We outnumber them, so we can start living for ourselves, however we can live amongst this government and all of its oppression. But we have to, and the minute we do, the minute we turn, knock on the door, it opens, the minute we turn to awareness of being at peace, regardless of the storm flying around us, we'll have it. And that is the ultimate win here for society, is to individually recognize they're swept up in a storm that they didn't create, they didn't know was going to happen, they didn't know how long it was going to go on for, and they didn't know how destructive it was going to be. But now we're at the end here. We got to be. Dollars aren't worth much anymore. No currency is really worth a bunch anymore. There's $303 trillion in debt. Eventually, all of this hits a wall, a math problem. It can't be solved, and then we get our humanity back because the governments won't have the funding anymore to do what they're doing. We can make the choice before all that to, not only protect our savings because financial autonomy is important, but get our life back while we still have years on the planet, this magical existence. We're all space travelers flying around this massive fire in the sky at thousands of miles an hour for maybe 70 or 80 years. Cherish that. Cherish that. Drop out of the news cycle, watching it all day, looking for doom and gloom. My God, man, you are what you eat. You feed your brain with the doom and gloom and the craziness, thinking the government's going to solve your problems and rooting for them like some sports franchise. You are lost.
So what do you think people could do? What practical things could people do this Christmas and in the new year to just take back a bit of control and help their family and prepare for the future so that they don't feel like helpless?
Anyone who cooks, big meals, Thanksgiving meal, Christmas, religious holiday meals, knows what it feels like to have someone benefit from something you made. Because the ultimate gift is something you can't ever get back, which is time. So when I was a kid and at numerous times throughout my life, I've made something and given something that to loved ones that I've made. It might be a picture frame. It might be having pictures printed, simple stuff. For many years, I made a Yule log, which was just a piece of a cedar tree cut down the middle in 18-inch lengths with 3 holes drilled into it that would hold candles. And cedar smells good. If you make something this year, and I know it's tough, but that's the challenge, right? That's the work. If you spend a moment to drop out of the world of commerce and make something and give that away, one, that will always be on display, or it'll come out every year when it's time. So they'll always cherish that you made something. And the first thing they're going to say to you is, "You made this?" And it's contagious. That's a simple way to drop out of, we'll just buy a bunch of stuff. Make something. That's my suggestion.
The other thing I would urge people to do, if you are thinking about your finances and you're thinking, I want a slightly better life for me or for my family, go and visit colonialmetalsgroup.com/TPV. Talk to one of the guys at Colonial Metals, because I know that they're always happy to answer any questions people might have.
Yeah, we are. We'll talk about your dog, your grandkids, the cruise you went on this summer. We're people too. So we're people that are going to meet you where you are in this thought process, in this conversation about protecting one's money. And the ultimate threat, and again, I'm not saying anything bad about the actual people in government. I'm just saying that if they're proposing you exterminate your grandparents to help slow down global warming, they're also in charge of the money you're paid in or were paid in when you were working. They're in charge of all of that. They're printing it. It's another example. Let's say I have a very dear friend. She grew up in an orphanage. Let's say there were, 50 kids in the orphanage, and they're struggling for resources in an orphanage, right? They need donations. Let's say all of a sudden on Saturday, there's 100 kids in the orphanage. On Wednesday, there's 1,000. By the end of the month, there's 10,000 kids in the orphanage. Now, the orphan is struggling to feel that they're valued because they don't have any parents in the first place. Now there's 10,000. That's what printing money's like. The money that was already here. It's like illegal immigration. The workers, the people that were already here in America are struggling for resources. But the government thinks it's cool to let millions, tens of millions in. Nothing against the ones that have a horrific life experience south of the Rio Grande. But when we're talking about life, we're talking about government leadership. When they make it possible for tens of millions of people to suddenly just come into your neighborhood and challenge the resource provision system even more than it's already challenged financially, they're saying you don't matter. And the dollars that were already in existence when the government unleashes another $100 billion a minute into the system from thin air ruins the value of the money that's already here. The government's making these choices. You need to make some. Not choosing is still a choice. So gold and silver is just money that is no longer in the dollar they're printing. It can't, mathematically speaking, historically speaking, thousands of years of proof, it can't be destroyed. We're not saying take your paycheck, put it in gold and silver, and then how do you pay your bills? We're talking about saved money that doesn't need to be spent on something, that has a safer position when it's in metal rather than paper, when it's in institutions that might struggle to provide you access to that money one day, because in gold and silver, it already is accessible. So if you're interested in that kind of conversation, one of the first persons I ever worked for in this industry said, gold is truth in money. Gold is truth in money. A truth is a principle. And at Colonial Metals Group, you're not going to talk to any jerks. We don't hire jerks, and we don't hire anyone pushy. We do hire people that can succinctly put a message right in front of you, lay out what the history books show in front of you, and become your ally. Because the missing ingredient to moving money into gold and silver generally is courage on your side of the phone. And that's what we help you find. We just help you understand that the government's not going to stop doing these things they're doing, because that's what the government does. Rome, Spain, Portugal, the Dutch, the French, the British, the Americans. What's in common with all those failed reserve currency nations? They printed money. They went into debts. They couldn't sustain their empires.
Viewers that are interested in learning more, please, I'd urge you to visit colonialmetalsgroup.com/TPV. I'll put the phone number up on the screen as well. And just go there and learn some more information. It's not a sales pitch. There's no hard sell there. It's just lots and lots and lots of great information and very, very helpful people on the other end to answer any questions you might have. Paul, thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you.